Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah and in today's video we are going to be crocheting some jellyfish. Now these guys work up in about an hour and a half. They are completely no-sew, making them perfect for market prep. For construction, we start with the tentacles and then we make the underbelly, which is a separate piece. We secure the tentacles to the belly, then we make the head and crochet them all together. So making this entirely no-sew, the only thing you have to do is tuck in one single end when we are finished. And you need to know how to tie some knots, which I'll be showing you how to do it most securely for these tentacles. For my jellyfish, I use some acrylic yarn, double-stranded for the tentacles, but you can use the same size yarn you're using for the head instead. So for example, I use a size 6 Chenille yarn. You can use the same sized yarn for the tentacles as well. And you can see my collection of jellyfish. I have quite a few because that's how quickly these guys work up. About 2 days worth of work if you just sit down and crochet. For today's tutorial, I will continually use the double-stranded acrylic. If you don't have that, like I said, use the same size yarn you're using for the head. So I am using some size 4 acrylic. I actually have the tentacles already started. For the head, I will be using this yellow Sweet Snuggles Lite, and it's a size 6 yarn. I have the center pull ready and everything, but we don't need this right this second. You can set the Chenille yarn aside for now, and we're going to use our acrylic or just your tentacle color first. I use a 6mm hook for this pattern. I usually use a 5.5 when working with the Chenille yarn, but with the double-stranded acrylic it can be really hard to work with, so size up if you have hand pain. Especially with the tentacles, it's not a big deal if the stitches are a little bit looser. You will also need a pair of scissors, a sewing needle for tucking in the end when we're done, and then a stitch marker if you need it. And then finally some safety eyes. I'll put the size up in the material list on the screen because I don't know the size off the top of my head. And if you don't want to use safety eyes, you can always embroider eyes, or you don't have to put eyes on it at all. I personally think eyes add character, but if you don't like eyes, then that's totally fine. You don't have to add them. I will be linking a beginner series down below and a how to embroider eyes also down below, so you guys can check that out when you finish your jellyfish if you want to embroider eyes, or if you need a refresher on anything beginner wise, you can check out that tutorial. So now we're going to start with our tentacles. We're going to start with our smaller tentacles. For my smaller tentacles, I'm using this pink yarn along with the shiny gold yarn. You're just going to need to leave a tail on your slip knot because we're chaining. You want to leave about 6 to 8 inches. You just need enough to tie several knots. Leave as much as you need for a tail. For these smaller tentacles, we chain 40. Have 40 chains. Should be pretty long, and we are going to half double crochet 2 in every single chain down, and you're going to skip that first chain. So half double crochet 2, half double crochet is when you yarn over and pull through all 3 instead of doing a double crochet, and we're just going to put 2 in every single chain or half double crochet and increase. I forgot to mention, but I crochet through the back humps of the chain, but this isn't necessary. You can crochet through any part of the chain because the chain will be in the center of your corkscrew. It really doesn't matter where you put your half double crochets. Your tentacles might be a little bit tighter if you crochet in the back humps of the chain though. Take your pick and keep it consistent throughout and do whatever works for you. Okay, here is the first corkscrew complete with the 40 in the chain. Once you have finished your corkscrew, you're going to chain one and you're going to fasten off. I like to leave a tail that's the same size as the tail I left when we created the slip knot. It doesn't really matter though. Just leave a tail long enough to tie a few knots, like I said earlier. And you're going to repeat the small corkscrew a total of 3 times. You're gonna have 3 tentacles. Like I said, I already finished these off screen, so I wouldn't have to bore you. And now we're going to move on to the large tentacles. Pause it here if you want to make the rest of the small ones, or if you want to switch back and forth, whatever you want to do. Just note that the corkscrews have to be finished before you move on to the belly. Now we're going to move on to the extra large tentacles, and by extra large I just mean large. These guys are a chain of 50, so we repeat everything we did for the small ones, we just have a chain of 50 instead of 40. Now for the tentacles, you can really go any size you want. If you want to make them longer, you can. For example, I actually have this jellyfish here. I did 50 and 64. My hand hurt really bad after doing all these corkscrews, so that's why I shrunk it down a little bit. But you can really go infinitely long as you want. Keep that in mind. You can keep crocheting just to add more chains, and then repeat the half double crochet increase in every single chain and you're good. Okay, and then same with the shorter one, we're going to do 2 half double crochets in each stitch and skip that first chain. Once you finish your large tentacle, chain one and fasten off just like we did with the other tentacle. Same with the small ones, you're gonna make 3 of these bigger ones, and you'll have a total of 6 corkscrews when you finish. If you wish, you can always make more corkscrews. You can make them shorter, longer. This pattern is really customizable, so you can really do whatever it is you want to do. So now we're going to move on to the belly or the underplate. This is actually a pretty straightforward piece. We're just going to get our plush yarn or whatever yarn we're using for the body, and we're going to make the underbelly. I use a little bit of acrylic to start my magic ring for my Chenille yarn. If you don't know how to do this method, you can check out the tips and tricks for Chenille yarn tutorial, which I'll have linked in the description. But basically, I start my magic ring with acrylic rather than with the Chenille yarn, and it prevents it from breaking and snapping and everything. For your first round, you're going to put 6 single crochets in either your chain 2 method or your magic ring. Both are interchangeable, so use whichever one you normally use, and make sure you have 6 single crochets in that ring. And once you've finished and you've closed it a little bit, we're going to move on to round 2, which is an increase in each stitch around. For the next round, you're going to increase and single crochet in the next stitch all the way around for a total of 6 times. For the next round, you're going to increase and single crochet 2 all the way around, or for a total of 6 times. Once you have finished that increase single crochet 2 round, we're going to slip stitch, chain 1, and fasten off. And you're just going to leave a short tail. This tail will just be tucked straight into the body, so we won't be doing anything with it. Now we're going to secure our center tails. If you're using the acrylic method, go ahead and tie them together. If you're not using the acrylic method, just tie a few knots with the single end on the back of the piece. I've shown this in other videos, so if you've seen any of my tutorials, you know what this looks like. But do this because it'll keep the magic ring or your chain 2 method from ever coming loose, or coming loose as easily as it would without it. Once the underbelly is complete, we have to secure the tentacles to it before we start on the head. Because when we work on the head, we're going to work all the way down and then secure everything together by crocheting it together. So that's why we need to do our tentacles now. You're going to need your crochet hook for this step, and you're going to need to know your right side and your wrong side. You want the tentacles to be sticking out of the right side with the knots on the wrong side. So try and keep track of that. I have made the mistake of securing every single tail without double checking that it was facing the right way first. So you're going to take your hook, you're going to push it from the wrong side to the right side, and you're going to be doing this through the last 2 rounds, between the last 2 rounds of the entire belly. And you're going to switch between which tentacle you're actually going to be using. So I like to make sure that the wrong side of the tentacle is facing out towards you. This just helps the tentacle sit nicely, and you're going to pull through one end through a stitch. You're going to go one stitch over and pull the other tail through. And now you're going to tie these two tails together, so just some simple knots. I like to make sure that the tentacles are super tight in, so pull the knots on the end of the tentacle through. I'm not sure if the camera is going to focus. And then we're going to tie a knot as tight as you can, and the second knot as tight as you can. This is not the end of the knotting, so just set them aside though. We're going to secure all the tails again when we finish putting them all together. If you can hear the bag, it is Arthur, my bad cat. When you put your extra long or your short one, doesn't really matter, you're just going to switch between the two. You're going to skip 1 to 2 stitches between every tentacle. You want to make sure it's evenly spaced. There's not really any wrong way to do this. Nobody's really going to notice if there is extra space missing, just because there's so many of these guys, it's just not going to tell. So since I put a yellow one on, I'm going to be using my pink one and doing the same thing we did. Pull one tail through, go 1 stitch over, pull the other tail through, and then tie these two tails really tight together. And we're just going to repeat this all the way around. Make sure you switch which tentacle you're putting on. And then when you finish those, we're going to do a little bit more securing, and then we can move on to the head. When you get to your third or fourth, you want to make sure that you have about half of a belly left. If you don't, just try and space them out a little bit further from each other. Like I said, no one is really going to tell if they're not spaced super evenly. You're just never going to be able to tell. So it's not a big deal. You just want to make sure you're spacing them enough that you don't have a big gap in the back. And then once you have all the tentacles on, we have one more thing to do. Make sure they're all facing the right direction and everything. If they aren't, it's not a huge deal. Like I said, it's not too noticeable. You just want to try and make sure you're being consistent. But, you know, if this is your first one, then it is what it is. If this is your 85th one, that explains why you're having trouble. When I was on my 9th jellyfish doing pattern photos, I felt like my brain was melting and I couldn't remember what I was doing. I stopped paying attention and I tied everything on wrong and had to untie it all. It was just a whole thing, so make sure you do it right the first time. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take one tail from each tentacle. We're going to tie them together, and when you do this, you don't want to tie them too tight because you don't want to misshape the belly, but you want to tie them tight enough that they're not going to go anywhere. So just take one tail from each tentacle, tie them together, and do that all the way around. This isn't necessary. It does make me feel better about the security of the tentacles because knots can come loose over time. This just makes it a lot harder for those knots to come loose. And if you're selling your dolls and you sell to kids, maybe your kids like to hang on the tentacles, tug them, pull them. So this just gives it a little bit more security and makes it feel a little bit more safe. So if this doesn't feel as secure to you, tie as many knots as you feel is necessary. You can also use a different type of knot if you know one that's more secure, so really just do whatever works best for you. And there we are back around. So now you can see we have this nice little circle situation going on. It's nice and secure, hopefully. And you can always do the pull test, tug on these, see if anything comes loose, and tie more knots if you need it. So now we can set our belly and our tentacles aside. It should look like this. All of these tails will be tucked into the body. so you don't have to worry about anything at all. You can just ignore these tails because we're gonna tuck them into the body. Here's how it should look so far, and you can just set this piece aside, and we're gonna work on the head next. Again, I will be using my acrylic strand to start my magic ring, but use whatever method works best for you. For the head, we're going to start with a magic ring or chain 2 method of 6 single crochets. Okay, for round 2, we're going to increase in each stitch around, total of 6 times. For round 3, we're going to increase and then single crochet all the way around for a total of 6 times. For round 4, we're going to increase single crochet 2 all the way around for a total of 6 times. For round 5, we're going to increase single crochet 3 all the way around for a total of 6 times. For the next round, we are going to increase and then single crochet 4 all the way around, or a total of 6 times. Once you've finished your increase rounds, you're going to secure your center tail, and you could really do this later as well. Just make sure you do it before you finish the head. Now we're going to move on to our single crochet round. So we're going to single crochet in each stitch round for 5 rounds total. And now I'm going to apply my stitch marker. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention it earlier, but you're going to put your stitch marker in the last stitch of any round if you use the stitch marker. If you can hear the cat, I don't know why the cats want to interrupt the video today. That's Lulu, and she's playing with a toy, which is really cute until you hear that every single morning. Here's what your jellyfish head should look like once you finish your single crochet rounds, or it should look similar to this. Different yarn types will have different results, and that's not a big deal. So once you're done with the single crochet rounds, we're going to decrease and single crochet in the next stitch, and we're going to do this 12 times around. This is going to drop our stitch count very quickly down to 24 stitches so that we can crochet the belly plate and the head together. Once you come all the way around, we are going to put our safety eyes in. If you aren't using them, I recommend embroidering the eyes on when the piece is complete, but you can really do it however you prefer. So the safety eyes go between the 3rd and 4th round, counting from the bottom up. Also put up on the screen how many rounds that is counting from the top, but I find it easier just to look at it and go 3 rounds up in between the 3rd and 4th round. And when you place the eyes, you want to have 6 full stitches between them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that is a good placement. Thankfully with the jellyfish, you don't have to worry about placing them in an exact spot or anything. You can just place them basically wherever. use the space between my scissors to close the safety eyes better. If you have a tool, go ahead and use that. If you do use your scissors, be careful not to cut yourself. So now we're going to begin joining our head to the underbelly. What we're going to do is we have to have our head and our belly facing with the tentacles out. What you're going to do is you're going to be crocheting through both the head and the belly. So you're going to insert your hook through the next stitch of your head and through one of the stitches of your belly. It doesn't matter what stitch, just go through one of the stitches. Now what you're going to do is you're going to slip stitch through both and just pretend like both these layers are one layer. And now in the next stitch we're going to double crochet 3. So we're going to make a little bit of a shell. So in these, make sure you go through both the belly and the head, put 3 double crochets in the same stitch. This might take a little bit of practice, so take your time and pull it out if you need to. In the next stitch, you're going to go through again both layers and slip stitch in the next stitch. And then we're going to repeat the shell and the slip stitch all the way around until you come back to the beginning of the round. So the shell, 3 double crochets in each stitch, go through both layers and just repeat it all the way around. Take your time with this as well. Make sure you have both of the correct sides. Pull the slip stitch tight if it wasn't tight when you did it, and just take your time with it. This doesn't need to be a race or anything, so pause the video if you need to at this point, slow it down, make my voice go into slow motion, whatever you need to do it right. When you're about halfway through this round, you're going to want to start stuffing, and you actually want to stuff a little bit more than you think you might need. At least in my experience, it is that way. You don't want the head to be squishy, so, I mean, obviously you don't want it to hurt somebody, but you don't want it to be too soft. I like to wait as long as I can for stuffing as well, because it can be pretty hard to crochet around once the stuffing's in. But you can always experiment and stuff it now and see how you like it. If it's hard to crochet, just pull the stuffing out. If it's easier for you, then whatever works. Make sure you tuck all those tails into your jellyfish and then stuff the head. I'm gonna crochet a little bit more. I can tell it needs a little bit more stuffing, but we're gonna make it a smaller gap first, just so it's a little easier. We are almost finished with this guy, just a couple more shells and then we are done. We only have to tuck in one tail, which is the best part, of course. Once you finish your last shell, you're going to slip stitch, and that's first slip stitch you made, chain one and pass it on. You just need a tail long enough to tuck it in. So using your needle, I recommend using plastic when it comes to chenille yarn. It just helps it fall apart less. We're just gonna go around the back end, and I will be tying a knot here so nothing comes undone, hopefully, and then just weave that tail in through the body. This tail, it doesn't really matter what you do with it, just do whatever is easier for you and tuck it in. And then I like to use my scissors to tuck in the tail so I don't have to save the scraps or anything. Give your jellyfish a little bit of a massage, make sure he's all good, and then he's finished. I recommend always shaking your plushies out when you finish them, just to get any extra fluffies off. When you don't sew, it's not as big of a deal though. But here is the jellyfish finished, and it's very fitting that the sun came out right as we're done. This guy, as you can tell, worked up pretty quickly. He's perfect for market prepping. It's also a really great way to get rid of scrap yarn if you have any. For tentacles, this yarn isn't the softest, but it's really not a big deal. This stuff is very durable, so it's gonna last a long time, especially with people tugging on it and holding it by the tentacles and everything. Highly recommend these for markets. If you don't do markets, then don't worry about it. They make the perfect gift. If you just want to crochet a jellyfish for yourself, then absolutely do it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. As you can see, the jellyfish offers a wide variety, a wide range of color options and everything. You can really just go crazy and do whatever you want to do. I honestly think the yellow one I made in this tutorial is my favorite. Hopefully you have made your own favorite jellyfish, and I will see you in my next video. My next video will be a market vlog, and then after that we'll have another tutorial for my axolotl pattern. So if you're excited for that one, make sure to subscribe and stick around for it. Other than that, I hope you have a absolutely wonderful day, week, month, and I will see you soon. Bye!